Welcome to Behind the Mask. I'm EJ, one of the co-hosts here. Lori T and I are going to talk about episode 57, The Masks of Adventure. Just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or a replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. Adventure. We're getting go on some. Lori and I have been on some. We've visited Tina and had some. So adventures and how important they are in our lives, but they can be as small or as major as you want them to be. Some for an adventure is just going to a new grocery store or going to a new store in town, visiting a local hotspot or
Getting out of
landmark.
bed.
Getting out of bed for some, yes, especially because we talk about people with chronic illnesses and chronic diseases, and sometimes they're not able to do that. So we're just going to talk a little bit about that and share a little bit about where we've been at and some of our adventures that we've had and some adventures we might be taking here soon.
I love that we talk about things that are in our everyday lives and that we're facing and that we're going through. And I feel like that's what lends the authenticity, the transparency that we're looking for, and just helps us to have fun with these topics that we choose. Throughout this podcast journey that we've been on, getting behind the mask, I've gone from being that person laying in the bed, not being able to move, nurses, doctors, I couldn't brush my teeth, I couldn't eat, I couldn't, like, being pretty prone, like, it just, learning how to walk and talk and do all those things again at a later stage in life, because of a stroke. At a really young age to have a stroke. To a person who, and you can attribute it to what you will, but I attribute it to my great relationship with my Heavenly Father. He has given me a second lease on life. I've had to do the work. I have been transforming my body outside, but I've been transforming my body inside as well as the outside. Did I say that right? Yeah. Even so, I've had significant change, even just from the beginning of this podcast. I've lost like 160 pounds. So I've lost a whole person. And then I've gone from being a person who wanted to walk through a vat of acid rather than losing that weight, right? And rather than getting back out into the world because I was so afraid and so scared, to now I'm getting ready to go on a 6-week adventure without my tribe, without my grandbabies, without my kids, I'm going to go stay with a couple of really good friends of mine. And I just am going on a grand adventure that there's no real purpose in it. Like, it's not like there's no deadlines in it. This is time for me to read, relax, be still. Oh my gosh, that's a concept I don't really grasp and understand that well. But also to see new sights and just have laughs and play cards and drink some wine and visit the ocean and just do things that I don't really, I haven't done in a while, and I don't get to do very often. I got a little taste of it last year EJ and I, and it really wasn't a little taste, it was actually probably a big taste. But we went on an adventure together and we put it out there on Facebook. We were, I did engage in things like boondocking, which I didn't even know what that word meant.
I'll explain it when you finish.
Yeah, yeah. But boondocking and kind of glamping, if you will. It wasn't quite, well, I'm not a go into nature roughing it kind of person. That's, if you know me, you know that
Just watching her try to say it, it's like,
I know, it doesn't even want to come out of my mouth.
I know.
But I definitely experienced some things I hadn't experienced before. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without all the transformation, without. I honestly sometimes have to pinch myself because I don't recognize me. Sometimes I feel like they talk in the Bible and we talk about in life that we're transformed, from a caterpillar, you go in this cocoon, and then you become a butterfly. And I feel like my life could not anymore exactly replicate that as to where I feel. It definitely was that caterpillar learning to grow and going through all this stuff, and definitely all the trauma and the life situations, and it's and then I definitely went into a cocoon. My body, physically, mentally, emotionally, I think it just shut down. Said, nope, we're going into this cocoon. There's no other way for survival. And now I'm out of the cocoon, but I don't know what that life looks like. Yeah, I'm still figuring it out. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about adventures and how you take them, and why you take them, and how you approach it in a healthy way. So
which is kind of, you're kind of leading into what we wanted to talk about in this first segment, which is all about what prevents us from making those decisions to go take an adventure. And I know for me, a lot of times it's money, fear of the unknown. I have to have a job, so my, you know, uh, schedule oftentimes, or I take the same trips because it's what I know. And sometimes it's, the big adventure that Lori and I took last year. It was way out of my comfort zone in some ways, but I was so excited to do it because I was like, we get to boondock and we get to go do this stuff that I've been watching people do like on videos for like years. Like, yes, I'm in. And we got to see friends along the way and help people too, because we, went down and helped a friend of hers with their wedding. We got to see friends we hadn't seen in a long time. And I think the old EJ probably would have been like, yep, nope, not doing that. I'll fly to that place, which I've never flown before. Yeah, I'm 40 and I've never flown on a plane. So
we have to rectify that.
No, we don't. Not necessarily. But again, I know, I'm a bigger person. It's not as easy to fly when you're larger. There's other things on it. And so I've just kind of always, I enjoy road trips. I enjoy hopping in the car and just driving, because even when we were on our trip, we're like, oh, let's go stop at that little shop, or hey, let's go we got Navajo tacos, like fry bread tacos, from basically the side of the road little shop, out of a window at this little, like there was it wasn't even an antique store. It was a little Navajo. They were selling some Navajo pieces, and kind of a museum. We couldn't even take pictures inside because they were asking us, because it's sacred ground. It's, it's the Navajo land. But it was right out of, it was the best thing I'd ever eaten. I mean, and just, we had an experience where like, let's take that exit and let's go do it. Let's not. And, we went through Moab. It's often a very big community for like dirt biking and, ATV and all that stuff, because you're out in the desert and you're, southern Utah. We went to Four Corners, which was way out in the middle of nowhere. It's where Colorado, Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico meet. I'd never been there, and it was just this weird, like, cool experience. Had we not, talked about it ahead of time, I know Lori was a little irritated with some of my pre-planning experiences. She's like, can we just go? I'm like, but I need to know what gas station we're stopping at. I need to know how far it is. And she's like, I don't care. So, but again, like, we're different people, but we made it fun. And Lori did talk about boondocking. Boondocking is when you go out and usually Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service roads, even in like rural places or city places like Cracker Barrels and some larger camping stores like a Bass Pro Shops often will let RVs and van lifers stay the night, like in their back parking lot. It's usually not with any amenities, but you at least have, and then boondocking is out in the middle of nowhere. You're just staying on the side of the road. You're staying in a dirt patch in the middle of a big field. And you basically sleep in the car, or depending on the area, you might be able to pitch a tent. But that really helped us out, because there was a few nights where we didn't have anybody in the area to stay with, and we didn't want to like drive extra way. Yeah, and we didn't have the money to stay in a hotel every night. We were at the Grand Canyon, and we stayed in one of their parks, kind of rest areas. And then we stayed in a Cracker Barrel a night, and then we stayed in a uh, rest area in New Mexico. If anybody thinks about doing that, just check the state regulations on that, because some people do limit, or some states do limit exactly how many hours you can spend at one rest area. This one we went to, New Mexico, allows you to sleep there as long as you're actually sleeping and you're not pitching a tent and all that stuff. So, but we worked it out, and we had a blast. But again, I think the old EJ would have never said, let's do this. I would have come up with some stupid grand excuse why I couldn't do it, and then not do it. And I can remember coworkers of mine that I had years ago, because I used to spend a lot of time on the computer or working. They're like, you need to have a life. You need to have a life outside of this job. You need to have a life, outside of the computer. And I'm still friends with some of them, and they are baffled to see the things I've done, because I have changed so much. Because the old me was so in such a anxious, depressive state that I would have never thought about doing something like this. And back then, I would have never thought, when I'm 39 years old, I'm going to take a 16-day road trip with my roommate in my car, which was a little hatchback car. It's not like it's some big Ford Expedition or like Chevy or Cadillac Escalade. This was a little tiny four-door Ford C-Max hybrid car hatchback. But we did it, and we had a blast.
You did. So T, can you help us identify some of the reasons why we wouldn't do things like that? What stops us?
Well, certainly all the reasons that EJ expressed, sometimes it might be you assume that to go on an adventure or to have an adventure costs money. Fear of the unknown, fear of even your own capabilities, maybe. It also, there's a bit, and I think I always come back to this on things, is how we define it.
Mhm.
So there's a certain expectation we assume that goes along with it that we must do in order to qualify it as an adventure.
Mm.
So I think, um, again, we assume we have to do it like everybody else. And sort of like when you're told to get a life, it's like, well, that was your life. If you're
Mhm.
content with it,
Yeah.
who's to say it's not? It comes out of concern and whatnot. But I think, yeah, how we define or how we qualify things
Yeah.
can be a factor in that. So
Isn't Bilbo Baggins said just walking out your door can be an adventure,
yeah,
right?
Right.
yeah,
I know
and
it's a
that's what I was gonna
fictional
say.
character, but you know.
I I view adventure a little bit different. It includes the things we can go do and see. But, and I was joking when I said, oh, I was kind of joking, getting out of bed can be an adventure. My world, it is an adventure. Sleeping's dangerous. I woke up injured. It's like, anyway, it's sort of our mentality. Like, that's what it is for me. Like, yeah, going and seeing and doing, I like to, it's a proof that I'm out living life. But sometimes going and doing my dishes is my adventure. It's how I choose to approach it.
Right.
It's you know, if we get caught up in how everybody else is doing it, we'll miss appreciating what we're doing. And life is an adventure. Life is a unfolding story. And how much a part of it do I want to be? And so, um, you know, I think instead of adventure, I'd like to think of experiences. What are my experiences and how am I
Right.
experiencing things? And when I was really caught up in my social anxiety, I didn't leave. I stayed home and, um, but I would still have experiences. Sometimes people come see me and that's what my experience was. Um, but there's also something to be said about getting out and having experiences that can be truly um, enriching. And adventure, if you think of all the adventure books you've ever read or watched or whatever, there's something to be overcome. And that's the adventure. We often will avoid that because we don't want to deal with the hardship, but hardship is
Mhm.
part of that experience. So I think it's a lot of it's a frame of mind, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I love
Okay.
that. I'm trying to remember if I shared this before when we talked about chronic illness, but one of my favorite little stories is about these two women that are sharing a hospital room. And there's a curtain between them, of course. And the one has the window and the other does not. And so the one, and I'm paraphrasing this,
Mhm.
and you may have heard it before, but the one woman says to the other, tell me what you see, you know, and she's describing, you know, a city and she's describing all these amazing things happening. And she's just sharing this experience with the woman who can't see those things because there's a divider. And yet they can communicate and they can talk, right? And and I can't remember in the story whether the other woman dies or she leaves, but she leaves. And the woman who was on the side that couldn't see asked the nurses, right? I want to be moved to the window this time. And she gets moved to the window. And really all that was out the window was a wall. It
Yeah.
was an alley and there was nothing really there, right? That's an adventure.
So
Even that, that's that perspective, right?
Mhm.
yes,
And
and that's a
it's
really
one of
good
my
point too.
favorite stories of it because this person embraced that, right? Where they are, and we talk about that with chronic illness. And, I remember laying in the bed and knowing that I couldn't get up and do the things and I had to figure out how to find each thing. It was an adventure to just sit up in the bed. And then it became an adventure to put my legs out on the side of the bed. And then it became an adventure to use a walker and and then to get in the water and and every day was a different and each step. And I love that you brought that up because an adventure can be anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's what you choose here and here that make
yes.
it the adventure, right?
And the other thing is we can't use other people's adventures to judge our own, because here's the thing, that a little bit of a kind of a catch in all this is that we are in this unique position in today's world to see everybody's adventures, but we're only seeing what they're choosing to show us. So then we hold our own adventures up to that and like, well, it didn't turn out the way theirs did, or it doesn't look how fabulous their pictures are, look how fabulous, look at the fabulous time they had. What you don't know is right before they took the picture, they were probably fighting.
Yeah.
I heard this one story or read this one story of this woman who was sitting beside a pool. And she was just relaxing there. And this woman comes in and she is dressed to the nines and she has a little girl with her and her little girl's all dressed up. But the woman's hardly paying any attention to her little girl at all. And like there's just, and when she does, she's and snapping at her and bossing her around and being a kind of a jerky mom. And then all of a sudden she pulls out her camera and her daughter are posing for this camera of this perfect experience they're having besides the pool, and post, look at us, look at what we're doing, and really saying these amazing things about her daughter. The camera gets shut off and it goes right back to the way it was. Snapping at her daughter, being mean, blah, blah, blah. It was, but everybody who saw that post would assume that this mother and daughter had this fabulous relationship and she was this great mom to this beautiful young girl and everything was perfect. So that's an aspect that we deal with. We see everybody's vacation photos. We see everybody's, oh, I went here and did this photos, and we feel less than because our experience doesn't look like what they're showing.
Yeah.
So our own adventures can't be about what others are doing.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, I from an outsider, my mom worked in an elementary school with a bunch of people her age. And I remember, you'd come back from the new school year and you'd be talking at like a staff meeting or like hangout time with teachers in your area. And they'd be all talking, oh, I took this cruise this summer. Oh, I did this. Oh, I did that. And then my mom would be like, and I just did this. She's like, I'm just so tired of them talking about X, Y, and Z because it's just, she's like, always talking about it. And then, so I remember my mom oftentimes, she's like, I just hate going back to these things because all they want to do is talk about all their summer cruises and things they did. And she's like, and we didn't do, anything, or we went to Minnesota and that was it, or we went to the ocean and that was it. Not that she didn't love going to the ocean because it was her favorite place to go. Um, but to her, compared to a cruise or a Disneyland trip, it wasn't the same.
So it took away from an enjoyment she had in the moment, and then coming back, now she's looking at it and it's like, that doesn't fit. So does it have the same value? And it can lose the value. I really encourage people not to do it.
Right.
Your experiences are so important to you.
Right.
I feel like it was inspired by what we're doing in this podcast. EJ, I'll ask you to make sure to put the link in there to our, what do we call it? EJ and Lori's Adventures.
Oh, yeah.
I felt like we tried, really tried, especially with a couple of the videos. Like I did some early morning ones, which is not my best time of day, put it that way. We tried to be realistic, and we talked about it. We talked about well, that night didn't go so well. And here's what, we tried to be kind of real about it. And we shared in our, even when we talk about it now, neither one of us shy away from the fact we'll talk about the time that we drove around this place 5 times and Lori almost got out of the car, and EJ's fuming behind the wheel, and we share that just as much as we share
Yeah.
the wedding pictures or the grand adventure in Galveston at the beach, or um
Oh, because EJ had to walk freaking what it felt like 6 miles to get to the beach. Yeah.
yeah. So we really tried to be as honest as we could and as real and authentic as we could in EJ's and Lori's adventures. So go check them out. We've got lots of pictures, and they're not all just the good stuff.
Right. Yeah, we shared
And
a few
that's,
times, even when we
yeah,
had to get, like, my car needed a jump, like, and our my charger thing wasn't working, and yeah, so just learning.
See, I think I want to make sure I'm clear. I don't think it's a bad thing that we share our experiences, like we post our photos. And yeah, of course, it's
yeah,
natural for us to want to put our best foot forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I love seeing all forms of that. It's just not judging yourself compared to what others are doing,
Yeah.
whether it's what they're actually doing or what
Yeah.
they're showing that they're doing. It's looking at where you're at and saying, wow, I got to have that experience. I wouldn't have gotten that experience. I wouldn't have been able to do those. Sometimes I'm not kidding, even driving down to the post office box, I'm like, wow, look at how beautiful the day is, or it feels
Mm-hmm.
like spring. I miss that. And, just being in the moment and having the experience, enjoying your life. Sometimes planning an adventure is great, and sometimes just experiencing it in the moment with what you're
Yeah.
doing. It
yeah,
really embellishes our life. It really fulfills it. And we don't have
Right.
to do these huge, great things to do that.
Yeah.
And I wish I didn't have to wait until I'm my unsaid age to realize that.
Right.
I so agree. One of the ways that, you know, being chronically ill, I chose with my doctor's help to give up my license. I cannot tell people how hard that decision was. I know you were really involved in my life at that time, T, and that, I'm a control freak.
I was quite shocked.
Yeah. Um, a lot of people don't realize what spurred it, but I was in the car with my youngest, and I had a diabetic low and I passed out behind the wheel. He, of course, panicked, but amazing. Did a great job. Reached his long little teenage boy legs over there. Gets the car to stop, pulls over to the side of the road, and calls 911. And, we didn't get in an accident, thank God. But it was very scary. And so for me, I had to pray about it. I was like, okay, your health, Lori, is at such a point that when you're behind the wheel, it's almost no different than if you were under the influence. You don't have control. You may think you do, but you don't. So I
Right.
had a discussion with my doctor and I chose to give up my license. If you were in my life in that first 2 years and you had to drive me someplace, all I can do is apologize, you know, after the fact, because I was absolutely a deplorable passenger. Absolutely. I,
I'm
I'm
liking the
not,
past tense.
yeah, I'm not grand now, but I have learned how to, you know, um, change some of that and get a
Yes.
different view. And one of the ways I did that was something that I'd never done before. And now I'm really grateful that I literally most of my life, people are like, Laura, you should stop and smell the roses. Sometimes I'm like, roses? There were roses? What roses? Because I'm going amok too with my hair on fire, right? Well, my health really stopped a lot of that and said, nope, sorry, you're not listening. Your body's done. You're going to sit here now. So I had to learn to embrace that and to figure out how to still have adventures and how to see things differently. And one of the things that helped me to stop driving the driver to complete distraction and irritating the heck out of them was to not focus at all on what was going on inside of the car. And I began to look outside the car, the window. I began reading signs and making games out of it. I began trying to find new places, taking pictures, just discovering that there was a whole world out there outside that car window that prior to, unless you were the car in front of me, the car behind me, next to me, or the passenger in the car with me, that I didn't focus on at all. If you had told me there was a whole big world out there, I'd have been, what world?
Right.
If it's not within 50 feet of this car and what's going on, right, I don't know what it is. Well, and so I was able to do that, change that perspective so that I could leave the poor, helpless driver alone and stop trying to control and brake and drive for them while they were, yeah.
Well, and I feel like that's pretty natural for anybody, especially one who's had a license before. And I know, I mean, we've had times where all of a sudden you'll be like, it's fun because okay, so I remember when I was learning how to drive, and we had it at school and driver's ed, and I remember they had those cars where there was a brake on the passenger side as well, and it was specifically for the teacher to be in the passenger seat, and then the driver's seat also having a brake. But if the teacher sees that the student is doing something wrong, they're going to slam on that brake to stop the vehicle regardless of where it is. And so I remember like when I'd be in my mom's vehicle learning how to drive and she'd be taking me out for drives, I remember her metaphorically slamming on her own brake because, she was trying to stop me from doing things and that, and not in a bad way. And I find myself when I'm a passenger, I can't focus on anything outside of the car because all I can focus on is the person driving, which I think is why I love to drive. And I know that it's because I like to control my environment, but I also know that I have some friends that aren't the greatest of drivers. And, they've had accidents and, I just don't want to feed into that. But on the other hand, it's funny how Lori and I can be driving down the road. In fact, we just went across the state. She had a doctor's appointment over across the state here, or she had to get some lab work and some stuff done. So we went across the state because there's no specialist for what for the specific specialist. She needed to go to the Seattle area. And so we drove over. And I remember there was a point and she looked up on this cliffside that we were driving past that I could see out my window. She's like, oh my God, there's bull elk up there. I was like, what, where? I didn't see any of it because I was driving, but she saw it. And then all of a sudden, as we were going, you could start seeing them more further down, closer to the road. And I was like, if Lori hadn't even have said anything about seeing that, I wouldn't even have known it was there because I was focused on what was ahead of me and who was behind me and beside me. And at the time, it was right around a really deep freeze we had. So there was a lot of ice on the road. So I was having to be extra cautious in the drive and following along with cars and following the divots in the road and stuff. But I'd have missed seeing those elk if she hadn't have said anything, which I feel like is why her and I do really well together when we're driving, because I'm not an aggressive driver. I tend to leave at least 2 car lengths between me and the front person ahead of me. So I have time to brake if I need to. which allows me to sometimes see other things, and not to be a Sunday driver and pointing out, every little thing on the road, but I enjoy
Look,
it.
Bill, there's a squirrel.
Right. But I remember coming back and seeing other stuff because, I can see more out of one peripheral vision than the other when I'm driving, just because one's like staying on this road. Like if I'm focused on this lane marker, then the other side can kind of focus on what's out there versus, when I come back, we're going the other direction. So then I'm on the other side. So then I can see stuff differently. So it's cool the things that we see in the different perspectives, even just like driving east versus west,
So
and Lori seeing stuff. So yeah.
there was this, I got to share this. There was this time I was riding with a friend and we were having to get on the interstate and she was having to merge. And this is a very notorious bad merging spot. Very little room, a lot of traffic already on the interstate going very, very fast. And so you're having to try to decide, are you going to get up to speed or try to get behind this vehicle? And of course, when you're merging on, it's the merger's responsibility to make sure they can do it safely. And I'm trying to remember how this all went, but I remember there was a car in front of us and they came to a complete stop in front of us as my driver was trying to get up to speed because she saw a gap that she could get into, but then this car stopped. And then the person on the interstate also stopped ahead. So everybody was stopped and there was no place for her to go. So she, of course, opts to head up the side of the embankment on the passenger side. And so she's screaming through this entire thing, like just blood curdling scream. I just kind of looked around at everything and it's happening so fast. I'm like, well, this should be fun. So finally, she's able to pull off, just pull off in a safe space. And she's still kind of screaming. And as she's coming down from the scream, she looks over at me and she goes, hey, what do you mean this is going to be fun? I'm like,
But what else are you going to do over there with no control?
This should be fun.
Oh gosh.
So the adventure depends on where you're sitting, I guess.
Yeah.
Amen.
Right.
Amen. I love it. I love it. Oh,
And
yeah, go ahead, EJ.
I was just saying, yeah, and I've had times where like, um, somebody I remember being a passenger and the person next to me, she was doing great, and that person I have no problem being in the car with, but I think we were talking and we were on a little mini road trip or something, and she said something about, yeah, I bet you do miss. She's like, you need to enjoy the drive too. She's like, I bet you miss a lot when you're driving. And I was like, you can, but again, I feel like that's why I've modified how I drive a little to give myself the opportunity to take a glance out the window every once in a while to see life. But yes, sometimes it is nice to be a passenger. And when you're not in control, it's like, well, here we go. Buckle up.
I love it. I love it. Driving is a good metaphor for life. I'm serious. It's like I don't know what they metaphor, but what, riding a horse? I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, so back to adventures. So the things that stop us from going on adventures. Um, Lack of funds,
Yeah.
Fears, comparisons.
Yeah.
What else? What else? What else can stop you from?
There's another one I was thinking of, and I know I've been guilty of this myself with you, Lori, is, you had some surgery, and I'm like, you're not going out on that. Um, because, you're currently like recovering and you don't want to slip. Or I remember when you had your knee surgery and like you were really going through it there, like you had it in like October, and by like November we had this very unseasonably ice cold snap, and we got a bunch of snow, and then there's snow and ice out on the thing, and you're like, and you were recovering and like you had a knee surgery. How are we going to, get you in and out of the car when you could slip and fall on the driveway? And I remember going out there every day, like we had the snow and shoveling and putting de-icer down so Lori wouldn't slip when she got in the car. And so when we observe things like that, like we let sometimes our chronic illnesses or our recovery from surgeries, physical things,
yes,
can sometimes hinder us. Me with flying, being overweight, not every airline carries the seatbelt extenders. Or there's, horror stories of somebody was required to buy a second seat because they were so big. So
yeah.
So it's not just physical limitations, it's the cost, not just financial, but the cost of going of doing something outweighs. So I know that I was just thinking, like, if that happened to me, how would I feel about that? And so there's those things too. And to me, it wouldn't be worth it. It'd be like, why would I want to go through that for this when I can go over here and do this and have a lot of fun?
I stopped going to amusement parks the larger I got because I couldn't get on the rides. And that was when I remember being absolutely mortified with one of my sons. We went to go on a ride together and I couldn't fit. And so I got off. I encouraged him and I think he did go ahead and ride it, but it was just a mortifying. There was a terrible cost to me emotionally in that. And so I gave up doing some of those things. It's very difficult. You just don't. And yeah, even if you have something, what if you're in a wheelchair? What if you're, on crutches? There's lots of physical limitations. Weight is just one of them. But emotional limitations too. Those being our depression, our anxiety, the things that stop us from doing what we're going to do.
For me, my feet hurt all the time. I can be on them 5-10 minutes and I am in extreme pain. So for me, an adventure is not going for a hike. It may not be going for a walk downtown or through a mall. Any of those things you tell me, I'm like, not doing it for me at that point. It's not fun for me. It's not an adventure for me. If the end result is more powerful than the pain I'm in, great. But oftentimes it's not. And so, but that being said, sometimes, like going for the hike, it might be something I end up really enjoying because there's something along the process that I really enjoy. I'm more likely to go for a hike through the woods than I am downtown.
Right.
Because for me, I like that. There's nothing downtown I want to see or do. It's not, I don't like window shopping. I don't like doing all that. So that's not a payout. So we really have to pay attention to what's valuable to us.
I love that.
Yeah.
We often talk, EJ and I, and in our spiritual family, there's a phrase that's called counting the cost. But I think that can be applied not just in your faith, but in life. You want to count the cost and evaluate what are the pros, the cons, right? What am I going to gain from this? What am I not? Where am I going to have to sacrifice? Where am I going to enjoy myself? And I think counting the cost can be a good thing.
And there's intentionality.
Yeah. Yes, I like that. That's my word for the year, being intentional. So I really like that, intentionality. So often, I guess, as we can move into some of the positives here, and I know we've talked about them, but if we were to, more often than not, and maybe there's some psychological thing behind this, when we choose to get outside our comfort zone, overcome that fear, embrace that thorn, count that cost, right? Make a sacrifice and do something. More often than not, it surpasses our expectations. There is a profound joy. There's a new experience. There's so many things, intrinsic value in counting that cost and moving forward with said adventure, whatever it is, whether it's stepping outside your door, being a better passenger in a car, going on a 6,000-mile trip, whatever it is. The it's calculatable. I don't know. Can't think the word correctly. But
Priceless.
Priceless, which is why Visa nailed that in their commercials, right? Sometimes an ad actually nails something that you can connect with. Other times I'm like, why am I, this is killing my brain cells. But Visa definitely nailed that one. The intrinsic value, the things we cannot even really count, are so amazing when we do. So then why don't we do it more often?
We assume we can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We assume we can't. Or we assume, like we've talked about, we assume we have to do it like everybody else. Or we assume it's not an adventure if it doesn't fit this criteria of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
It kind of starts with in us, like that, what do I want out of my life? What do I want to experience? And am I going to do it? It's choices, it's intentionality, it's knowing that I'm going to do this, and I can go into it feeling resentful. I can go into it feeling like I just don't want to do this. I'm going to be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
We can choose that, and that's okay. That's a choice. Or we can go into it saying, yeah, I don't really want to do this, but I'm going to make the best out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And come out the other side of it like, okay, what did I get out of that? What did others get out of it? Do I regret doing it? Most of the time, I don't. Most of the time, I do not regret doing the things that I took a risk to do.
So I'm pretty open and transparent and honest about the fact that, I live on a fixed income. I have been disabled for the past decade of my life. So I don't have a lot of money.
Mhm.
What I'm doing with this 6-week adventure, I very intentionally began to pray about it, began to contemplate it.
Mhm.
I wrote down, okay, because there's that concept of, and T, you and I talked about it. I'm like, gosh, I wish I had $1 million. I could be a snowbird and I could have another place to go be for, January and February and March, where it's freezing here, at least for me. I know other people have it colder. But for me, this is mini Siberia in February and March, and it is so cold. But I live on a fixed income. Well, how am I going to do that? I began to kind of look around, kind of like we did also when EJ and I were like, we started looking at airplane tickets. That was how I was first going to go to the wedding, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And as I'm looking at that on my fixed income, hello, I couldn't do that. I don't live on a lot of credit cards and things like that either. Because I just don't have that. So I'm like, how are we going to do this? And EJ, and when you start to talk about it, when you start to look for ways, well, what if maybe, what about this and what about that? We looked at trains, we looked at buses, and here my non-adventurous roomie bestie says, we could drive. And we're like, well, what would that look like? And then we had to, well, how much would that cost? And, and then we couldn't stay in hotel rooms because that's darn expensive, and neither one of us are made of money, so but same thing with this adventure that I'm getting ready to leave on, on Tuesday for 6 weeks. I can't afford a summer home and a winter home and that's just not in my thing. But I have these friends that moved to a place that I love and that I've, been wanting to go to. They got a living thing arrangement and moved into this beautiful home. And they're like, there's a room here, Lori, and it's got your name on it. All you got to do is get down here. And then, it was flying out of different airports to save money and, doing all these things. And next thing you know, I look like I'm some snowbird wealthy person, I'm going down to my winter home, but it's not like that, but I'm going to make it like that because I'm going to have fun with it. And I'm getting ready for a grand adventure that somebody on a fixed income normally couldn't do. But I know it's because I prayed about it. I began to say, God, I need you to help me see how it could be possible. What might it look like? It's going to look different than the average person who goes and is a snowbird. And slowly but surely, as my mind and heart were open to it, all the little situations began to solve themselves and fix themselves. And all of a sudden, I bought the plane ticket and we made the arrangements, and I leave in 1, 2, 3, 4 days. And my grand snowbird adventure is going to happen. But I had to be open to it. And I had to realize it wasn't going to look like everybody else's.
Right. And I think that's kind of what we're alluding to is, everybody's experiences are going to be different. Everybody's opportunities of growth is going to look different. My growth is just actually going on a trip. Whereas
you did great.
Well, yeah, and before I moved over and in with Lori again, because Lori and I lived across the state together for a while, so it wasn't like we didn't know each other. So when I moved in here, again, about a year and a half-ish ago, I had been looking at different opportunities to have kind of this grand boondocking experience, but I didn't know how it was going to happen. And, I'd been doing some research and buying some stuff for the car so I could have it if I did want to take like a long weekend trip or something. And so when I think last year she was looking at flights, and I think it was going to be $500 or $600 for a round trip ticket to go to her friend's wedding for like 2 days, because her friend was down there, but then another friend was there, and they're like, well, we want you to stay longer. And then like looking at what that would be, it was gonna be like $700 for just her to go down there for like a couple of days. And she wouldn't have gotten the time to stay down there and see the people that she saw. So I'm like, after we looked at train, planes, and automobiles, we were like, let's take the automobile option. And, like I said, I'd never seen the Southwest US. So we talked about it. We looked at the map and we're like, well, I want to go to Roswell, New Mexico, and I want to go see my aunt and uncle in Albuquerque. And so we made it happen. And, we got to experience going through Albuquerque twice and seeing my aunt and uncle, and they were very encouraged to see us and happy that I, stopped by. And so we both got stuff out of it. And I think that's the important thing when you're talking about adventures of any kind, is how can you get something out of it, but also like make memories, and how you can give to other people too. So like, we had some friends. Lori and I met a fellow writer through our church on a Zoom group that we were in during the pandemic. And they're like, oh, well, we now live there, you know, in the state that we went to. And we're like, well, maybe we should get together. And the next thing you know, we're staying like 2 nights at her and her family's home. We'd never met them in person before. Um, but we'd had this online relationship for years, and we're like, let's do it. So we added some time to the trip to do it. And I feel like, yeah, it was a little nerve wracking. And I'm like, you want me to what? You want me to add another 2 days to this? And then something else came up with some other friends that were coming into another. So it's like, we I know that we're all like, as Christians, we're not supposed to be selfish, but in the world, it's a lot of what can I get out of something? But I feel like in this situation, you also have to be able to get something out of this, or to you, it's not worth doing. So
Doing
I
the
we yeah, we had to count the cost, and I'm like, is it really worth doing? And it was. I got a lot of amazing experiences. I got to go through and see the Moab and some of the southern Utah, the South. I mean, really, I'd never been there. And Lori and I are going to be taking a trip here in the next few months. We're going to another conference. I'm going to go to this one, and I'm terrified too, but I'm going to do it. And I've made it clear I'm not looking forward to it, but I'll do it. So plan on me being in the back of the room with hiding in my phone or something, just to, there's like supposed to be like 2,500 people there, so it's not going to be a small conference. But we're gonna make some trips. We're gonna go see my aunt uncle again. We're gonna kind of do like a little loop again. It's not gonna be as long as our 6,000 mile trip, but we're both gonna get a lot of things out of it. And I think that's kind of where it boils down to is, you know, there has to be a benefit to everyone involved. And Lori, like Lori said, counting the cost and really trying to understand what the emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental costs is going to be. And if that outweighs the negative.
T, um, you and your husband have been inspiring to me in that you guys have found little ways with his health, your crazy schedule to do things, go fishing and go shooting and take a little drive. And like you said, it doesn't have to be a 6,000-mile trip.
Right.
You guys have some limitations in your life, and yet you found a way in this beautiful place that you live to get out there on the good days. And I love that. And I got to participate in a couple of those with you, and it's been really fun. And we've talked about aren't you guys doing the kayaking?
Yeah, we started doing that when we can.
Which is amazing. And I love that. It doesn't have to be epic scale.
And it doesn't have to be without challenges.
Yes.
So I was just sitting here thinking, some of my best stories, some of my best experiences involve challenges overcome.
Yes.
So, I mean, I've been in some really interesting situations. They're some of my favorite stories to tell. But in the moment, and especially when I was younger, in the moment, the challenges felt very overwhelming, and so big that it would be impossible to get over. But now that I'm older and I can look back, and now when I experience a challenge or difficulty, oftentimes I can stop and say, you know what? This isn't the end of the world, and it's going to make an amazing story.
It makes me think back to when you and I met. You were definitely stepping outside your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes, I was.
Yeah, you were. And I was too, in that I had never operated inside of that theater world up into that point, outside of being a spectator. I'd gone to several plays and participated in things, but if my speech teacher, my speech 101 teacher, who we all adore and love,
Mm-hmm.
hadn't he's like, I remember he came to me. He's like, so Lori, what do you know about the theater? Have you ever been do you know what a stage manager is? I'm like, no. He goes, you'd make a great one. Want to be one? And I was just at a time where I was like, sure, sure, why not? Okay. And then that's how, you and I really got to connect. And then, doing things that we were so sometimes uncomfortable with. But it was a great time. And I can't, it just really made me think back to both you and I were outside our comfort zones when we met.
Just going to school was because
Right.
I was coming out of my near agoraphobia. I mean, I was nearly diagnosable as that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. And we met. We counted that cost a long time ago. I'm glad we're still counting that cost as a good one.
Right. Well, I know we have to wrap things up here, and I think we've talked about a lot of great thoughts. And please, feel free to message us if you have any other thoughts or things you want to add to, because I'm sure one of these days we'll do a wrap up video where we'll touch on things that people have shared.
And feel free to tell us in the comments about your adventures.
Yeah, for sure. I'd
We'd love to hear them.
Yeah. So just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. This episode is on YouTube and most major podcast platforms. If you're not a subscriber, we'd love for you to be one. So don't forget to like and click the subscribe button to keep up with our future episodes. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram and Threads as Behind the Mask PC. You can also email feedback or future episode ideas to us at behindthemaskpc@gmail.com. To find us, EJ, Lori, and T online, links for us will be in the description box, including EJ and Lori's adventures. And on behalf of the ladies and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.